Hello everyone. Today I would be talking about how to draft an engagement letter for a freelancer. I will be discussing this from a freelancer's perspective as many of us want to venture into the independent consultancy space but do not really know how to enter into an engagement with a prospective client. Now, some of the key clauses which one needs to keep in mind while drafting an engagement letter for a freelancer are first and foremost, the scope needs to be clearly laid down. So what are the services that are being offered? The specific details of each of these services. For example, if you are providing an article writing service to a company. Now, how many articles you are writing? What would be the average page length, the average word limit, etc. All this needs to be captured in the contract. Now, everything needs to be laid down. For example, if there are more than 3 or 4 deliverables you are giving to one client, do not club them under one vague definition of a service, but lay out each deliverable specifically and categorically. Now, payment, this is the most important term because when you are not an employee of a company, it becomes all the more important for you to have yourselves protected under a written contractual obligation. Now, clearly mention by when would you want to receive your payment. Typically, it should be around 7 to 15 days within the raising of the invoice. Now, whether it would be a monthly based payment or a deliverable based payment, that also needs to be clearly captured in the agreement. Now, there should also be a timeline for raising and clearing invoices. For instance, if you think of it from the company's perspective, they cannot sit for and wait for you to raise your invoice and you end up raising your invoice at the end of the month. So there should be a time limit imposed both on you as a freelancer and also on the client to clear your invoices within a given stated time. Now, no employer-employee relationship. This is extremely important both from the freelancer's perspective as well as the client's perspective. Now, there should be a specific clause in the agreement which categorically states that no employer-employee relationship is created by the virtue of this agreement between the freelancer and the client. The agreement is on a consultancy basis and there is no principal-agent relationship being created. This is extremely important because if at a later time, the freelancer or the consultant goes and represents himself or herself as a permanent employee of the company, then that may create a problem for the company. Similarly, if the consultant later on starts claiming employment benefits, that may also cause a problem for the company. Therefore, this is something which one really needs to have captured in the agreement. Now, deliverables. So as I stated earlier, one needs to have the scope of services clearly laid out. Now, there should be clear timelines which should be mentioned. Otherwise, the client and the freelancer or the consultant would not be on the same page. So, and also whenever stating timelines, make sure that a mutual consent is reached between you and the client. So, for instance, you shouldn't be stating, I would deliver this within 7 days, while the client is expecting you to deliver it within 3 days. So, depending upon the mutual consensus, clear timelines should be laid down. If this is not possible, there are a lot of times when you cannot mention clear timelines for each and every deliverable. Then the timelines would be decided based on mutual consent and on a deliverable to deliverable basis. Then before accepting each assignment, you should actually sit down and discuss with the client that what the turnaround time is required, what should the turnaround time be. Now, quality check. Again, I personally feel there should be a set timeline for the client to do the quality check as well. Otherwise, the client may take your work, sit on it for 2 months and 3 months and say, we are still reviewing it. And then you do not get paid in the meantime. So such kind of an arrangement should not be there. So if you are entering into an agreement, you should also mention a timeline within which the client would need to review and suggest you changes, if any, or accept your work and send the same back. Now, also with respect to commitment, as in the duration of the agreement. Now, for instance, the client wants someone for a period of 2 months or 3 months and they engage you. Now, there should be a clear commitment from your side to actually work for those 2 months or 3 months and not leave in between. So that intent should also be captured clearly in the agreement. Now, confidentiality. Confidentiality is an extremely important clause when it comes to freelance agreements or consultancy agreements, because you're not an employee of the client, and therefore it's all the more essential for the client to protect their own proprietary information as well as their prospective clients or their current clients' confidential information in case they are giving you any. Therefore, clear non-disclosure obligations should be mentioned in the agreement. If possible, a separate non-disclosure agreement can also be executed, which can be supplementarily a part of the main agreement. One of the most important thing is how one defines confidential information in this agreement. Now, all information shared should be made confidential, irrespective of it being marked as confidential, irrespective of the way it has been transmitted. So if you've orally told something or in writing or through electronic means, everything should be considered to be confidential information if it has been shared in the pursuance of the agreement and in the pursuance of the services you are delivering to the client. Now, exit option. A lot of people forget to actually mention the termination clause in the agreement. And that makes it extremely difficult for, especially for the freelancer to leave the engagement when things are not working out for them, because they wouldn't really have a right to terminate the agreement. So it's extremely important to have an exit option or a termination clause in the agreement. Now, termination simpliciter means terminating the agreement by giving a prior notice period. Now, typically, because freelance arrangements may be for just one project or maybe for a 3 to 6 month period, etc., it's always better to have a notice period between somewhere, say, 10 to 15 days. If there are any pending assignments, typically one completes them. If there are any pending payments, make sure to include in this clause that all such pending dues would be cleared. Now, termination for breach. This is again important. What if you've signed an agreement for 3 months and the client doesn't pay you for the first month? Would you still want to continue? No. In that case, you should have a termination for breach clause also in the agreement, wherein you can terminate with immediate effect, so that you do not have to do extra work and then terminate later on, or you would have to finish any pending assignments. Therefore, it's very, very important to have both these kinds of termination clauses in the agreement. These are some of the key clauses which one can include in a freelancer's agreement. There can be many more depending upon the scope of the engagement. For example, you can include the term clause. For example, there could be, a lot of boilerplate clauses, the severability clause, etc. But these are the key non-negotiable clauses which you should have. Another important thing which you should keep in mind is never agree to a penalty clause. So typically such clauses are not included in a freelancer's agreement. But if you do come across a penalty clause in a freelancer's agreement, where the client says that they are going to penalize you some amount of your remuneration if you delay in delivering, according to me, that is not a fair enough clause. Better than that, to come at a mutually agreed timeline and have the timelines mentioned clearly in the agreement. And in case the timeline is breached, consider it as a material breach of the agreement and terminate the agreement, rather than penalizing the freelancer for causing delays in the agreement. I hope this is useful to you. And if you have any questions, you can either leave a comment here or you can message me on LinkedIn. Thank you. Have a nice day.